Welcome back to today's Office Administration class. In today's lesson, we'll be looking at the factors to consider when selecting various communication medias. In previous class, we discussed the various communication media, which they are the written, the oral, the visual, and electronic communication medias. Now, today we're going to discuss the factors to consider when we are selecting which will be the best communication media to select to send our message. Now, there's a lot of factors to consider when selecting our communication media. There's a degree of urgency, the most appropriate method, level of confidentiality, location and distance, the cost, internal or external use, complexity of material, the importance of the message being written, equipment available, good news or bad news. So let's discuss the factors to consider when selecting communication media. Let's start with the degree of urgency. Now, how urgent the message needs to be received or sent will determine on what media we use. For instance, if you really need to contact somebody for an impromptu meeting, you won't write them a letter and then send the letter through the post office for them to reach. It may take a couple of days for them to get or receive the message. The fastest way there is, if you have their telephone number, is to contact them via the telephone. So it all depends on how urgently this message needs to be transmitted. Will determine what communication media is being used. Then there is the most appropriate method. Now, it's all depend upon the nature of the message or the content of the message will play a factor in determining what communication media is being used. For example, if you have a lengthy report to give, you will not go and present it orally because the person receiving a message may not retain all the information or they may miss some points. In that case, it's good to write that information down or that message down. So it all depends upon what will be the most appropriate way to present your information. Then there's a level of confidentiality. Some methods of communication are more suitable to be confidential at work. An appraisal interview, for instance, should be conducted in an office with the door closed, not in an open plan office or on the telephone, because person can overhear what is being said if you are discussing something highly confidential. Then there is the location and distance. Teleconferencing is cheaper and more immediate than sending executive long distance by air for a meeting, which may last only for a few hours. So depending upon the distance and the location, you will select your way of communicating. Let's say someone have to have various manager meeting and they are in different regions of the world. Instead of flying all of these manager to one location to have that meeting, you can use either teleconferencing or video conferencing to conduct that meeting wherever they are in the world. Then there is the cost. Then there is the cost factor. In most instances, the cheapest and the most appropriate method should be selected because you need to save money, or you also need to send the message in the most effective manner as possible. So what is the cheapest way to send it in the most effective manner should be selected. Then there is internal or external use. For instance, you may communicate differently with person within an organization than someone outside of the organization. For instance, you might send a memo to staff when communicating information to them, and whereas you will write a letter to customer or suppliers when you're communicating externally. Then there is the complexity of the material. A combination of media may be necessary to ensure effective communication. The importance of written record. Now, some communication or some messages need to be done writtenly because they need to have proof of or written evidence of various communication or various messages. Then there is the equipment available. Now, depending upon what equipment are available, if you have a fax machine, computers, telephone, you will decide what will be the best method for you to communicate, or which are the best equipment for you to use to make communication or with. Then there is bad news or good news. Then there is good news and bad news. Now you must take into consideration the feelings of the recipient of whom the message is being sent. So you must know whether it's a good news or bad news, and what would be the most appropriate manner to do so, whether it will be over the telephone or in person. What will be the most appropriate way to share either good news or bad news. Now this has bring us to the end of today's lesson. I hope that you have learned something today, and keep doing your own research, your own reading. Stay safe, and I will see you in the next class.